it's Jess, and welcome to the Lolita vlog. I'm actually Jess from way in the future. I just want to apologize for a couple of things in this coming vlog. The first being this vlog is one that I filmed over the course of like 8 months. I actually started reading for this vlog, I believe, in May. I just wanted to apologize for how chaotic this vlog is going to be. And I also just wanted to apologize for the video quality. If you've been around here for a while, you know I film on my phone, and I just got a new phone a couple months ago. Before that, I was filming on a pretty old phone with pretty terrible video quality. So I did want to say I'm sorry. The majority of this vlog is going to be pretty low quality. You know, I was just working with what I had. I'm still working with what I have. This is financially the best that I can do at the moment. There you go. Welcome to the Lolita vlog. I hope everyone is having a good day, having a good week. I just wanted to go ahead and start this vlog off. This is the Lolita vlog. I will be reading 3 books in this vlog. I'll be starting off first with Lolita. This is basically a book told about pedophilia from the point of view of a pedophile. It is about Humpert Humper and how he grooms and seduces Dolores Hayes, who is a 12-year-old girl. I've basically been talking shit about Lolita for years because that's the premise of the book, and people think it's a love story. It's not, but I've never actually read it. I then found out about 2 other novels, which will be the second and then the third books I read in this vlog. One is Becoming Lolita, which is a non-fiction investigative story about who is like the real Lolita, who is apparently like a real case that happened, and it, I guess, inspired the author of Lolita. And then the third book for this vlog, which is actually the book that inspired the entire vlog, is the book Becoming Lolita. This is a nonfiction memoir, and it is about this woman's life. She was groomed by her English teacher, who used Lolita to groom and abuse her for years, and then now as an adult she also teaches English. I'm not sure at what level, and my understanding, I could be wrong about this, is that she now teaches Lolita in her class. So that's what really started this whole thing in my mind going. I was like, if someone who has this backstory can use Lolita for good and teach it in their class, perhaps there is more to the story than I know. I am trying to keep as open mind as possible with Lolita. Every other classic that I've read, even if I didn't like it, I at least understood why it was a classic and like what it added to literature in general. So maybe I will discover what Lolita adds to literature. I did want to say though, a disclaimer for this entire vlog. This is going to be a very heavy vlog in terms of what I am reading. All 3 of these books are going to discuss pedophilia, child abuse, grooming, and rape. While I think it's important to discuss these books, I think it's important that these books exist. I do think that this entire vlog could be triggering to people, and I think that if this is not the vlog that you should be watching, please close it. I'm going to start with Lolita. I'm a little hungry right now, so I think I'm gonna go get some food. And if you're still here, I will see you in the next clip. Update time. It's a lot. I just finished Part 1. I have like a lot of tabs in here, like a lot. I'm using red for red flags. And as you can see, they're mostly red. I'm also highlighting, and I've actually been writing notes in the margins for this. I'm trying my hardest to find something to take away from this book, and so far I do not get it. I don't get it, and also I'm mad because on the back of this book, it says, most of all, it is a meditation on love. Love as outrage and hallucination, madness and transformation. And like, this isn't a love story. This is a story about pedophilia. Maybe I am too stupid to understand. I am not cultured enough to understand this classic novel. I knew that this book was a book about a pedophile going into it. Like, I knew it was about Humpert pursuing this very young girl. But for some reason, based just off of like culture and existing within like the book world, for some reason I thought that Humpert was meant to be this like sympathetic character, and that like that is the draw to the book, is that like you feel bad for him, but also that the girl, her name is Dolores, he calls her Lolita, but I thought that she was like the first child that he was into. But it turns out that he actually has only ever been into children. More content warnings, even though I've already talked about this. Yes, there is rape in this book. It is not explicit. I'm almost halfway through the book and he explicitly says that he rapes her. Like, according to him, it's not rape, but like that is what happened. But it is not a graphic on page thing that happens. Also, like, literally, what the fuck is wrong with the author of this book? Because, okay, so there's this moment where Dolores has something in her eye. He's like grooming her this entire time, but nothing crazy has happened. This is like super early on in the relationship. So Dolores has something in her eye, and she's just like in the bathroom with the door open and the mirror trying to get whatever's in her eye out, and she asks him for help because he's an adult and she's 12, and he tells her that like some, I forget what, but like some society, they would like lick each other's eyeballs to clean them. And she's like, oh, okay, I'm 12 and not very educated. And this man licks her eyeball. What? Who comes up with an idea like that? Also, there's a lot of like awkward writing in here. Humpert tries to like kind of blame things on his past, like, oh no, I didn't have a mommy and blah blah blah. When I was 13, I met this 13-year-old girl on the beach and we fell in love, and then that's why I'm in love with a 12-year-old now. Like, you know what I mean? Whatever, we're not fooled. When he was 13, he fell in love with a 13-year-old girl, and they had like a summer together, and that's fine. And like, they were trying to fool around. Vladimir wrote, from Humpert's perspective, I was on my knees and on the point of possessing my darling. And then he writes, and 4 months later, she died of typhus. What? It's just fucking wild shit going on in this book. Oh yeah, I also loved this. This is like literally in chapter 4, and the chapters in this are very, very short. So this is on page 15. He's again talking about fooling around with this girl, and said, I gave her to hold in her awkward fist the scepter of my passion. And I wrote in the margins, her fist is as awkward as this sentence. Why? Also, Vladimir was definitely a racist man. At the beginning of the book, I was tabbing all the times he was racist with like red flag markers, but like honestly, it got to the point where I was just like, I don't have enough red flag markers for this. In 1955, this book was published, and he was born in 1899. Like, he's an old dead racist white dude. Lolita is actually like a book within a book. Humpert has written his own story from jail. It starts with him being like 13 or whatever, with his like very first love, falling in love that summer, and then I'm assuming tells his whole life. But there's a foreword written in the front of this book, and it's actually like a fake foreword. And I was actually so scared at first because I was like, is someone endorsing this book? It's written by J. Ron Jr., PhD. And I literally had to Google like what was going on because I was like, is there a man that was like, yes, pedophilia is actually okay? Basically, the foreword of this book is like, yeah, it's such a shame that our society is so puritanical and conservative that I can't have sex with children anymore. And that's also what Humpert's position is on this, by the way. I really hate that my impression of this book was that Humpert was this like conflicted man who hated this part about him. And I thought that that is why people die hard on this Lolita Hill, because they're like, no, Humpert is a man that did terrible, terrible things, but he also hates himself and he knows what he's doing is morally and ethically wrong, and he hates that about himself, but he's sick and he can't help it. And I thought that like that is what made Humpert an interesting protagonist and what made him sympathetic to some readers. But no, Humpert actually doesn't think what he's doing is wrong. He has like the mindset that like society's laws are what dictate morals, and that's not in fact true. But like Humpert's like, pedophilia is only bad because right now society says that it's illegal. Dude, it's a car! A car just drove past and Dexter saw it, and now he's losing his mind. Humpert legitimately does not think that pedophilia is wrong. He just basically is like, there's nothing wrong with my being attracted to this 12-year-old girl, and there's nothing wrong with me wanting to have sex with her, but society says it's illegal, so for my society it's bad. And he like makes that distinction in his head, and his main conflict is like, well, I don't want to do anything because I might go to jail. It's not because he thinks what he's doing is immoral, it's because he doesn't want to face the consequences about it. It is so rough being in Humpert's head. He's like basically trying to figure out how he can molest this 12-year-old girl while still keeping her like pure and innocent. Like, he very much has made Dolores into this like caricature, and he has put his lens on her, and she no longer is a person to him. She just is like the object of his obsession, and it's very much obsession. This is not a love story. If someone tries to tell you that this is a love story, that's a red flag and you should run away from them. Humpert is obsessive and a predator. He is manipulative. He gaslights everyone around him. At this point in the book where I'm at, he's had multiple violent fantasies. Like, this man has a lot of violent fantasies, and you know what holds him back? He doesn't think he's smart enough to get away with murder. That's what holds him back from murdering people. It's wild. It is actually wild being in Humpert's head and seeing his thought process. The thing, too, that is frustrating about this is I have seen him being manipulative to everyone around him, and I've seen him gaslighting, but the thing is, this is told from his point of view, and so I know that he's leaving things out, and it must be so much worse. Oh, you know what, too? Fun fact here, something that we need to keep in mind. You following me? The two of us, we need to keep track of this. Okay, so in the foreword by this random made-up person, he says, this commentator may be excused for repeating what he has stressed in his own books and lectures, namely that offensive is frequently but a synonym for unusual, meaning that pedophilia isn't really offensive. It's not bad. It's just unusual. It's just a little quirk, and you're just not ready for that. You're just not open-minded enough for pedophilia. But then he goes, and a great work of art, because he's referring to Humpert's memoir, which is the story of Lolita, as a work of art, is of course always original, and thus by its very nature should come as more or less a shocking surprise. What I want to call your attention to is the part where he says it's original. I haven't finished Lolita, and we have not read the other two books yet in this vlog. So I do not know what's going to happen. But I do find it interesting that Vladimir wrote Lolita, and then Vladimir wrote this fake foreword where he's like, everyone, look at how shocking and original my novel is. But we're about to read a nonfiction novel that maybe exposes that Vladimir stole a real girl's story and then published it as Lolita. So far, Lolita is a steaming pile of trash, but I could see why people like the writing style. Okay, I really do gotta go now. Hi, I'm in my living room. It's quite a bit later. I'm reading. I'm on page 179 now, but I just cannot get over this line. Like, I have to share it with you all. It's not a spoiler by any means, but this man really sat down, wrote this book, and decided that this is a line that he wanted to put in his book. We are still groping, perhaps, but we grope intelligently, like a gynecologist feeling a tumor. I'm sorry, but what is that? Like, what is that line? It's so terrible. Why would you think that's a good line? Why would you put that in your book? It's so stupid. It's like the stupidest line I've ever heard. I just can't get over it. Hello. Reading update time. I have finished Lolita. This book is terrible. I can understand why people like Nabokov's writing style. I get it. He definitely has a distinct voice. I didn't really love his writing style. I didn't hate it. It came across very, very pretentious. Part of that, though, was the inner dialogue of Humpert. He's just like a super pretentious piece of trash guy. So I do think that it wouldn't be as pretentious in some of his other novels. I want to read all three of these novels before I reach a set conclusion about Lolita. But if I only read Lolita and that's it and we called it here, this would be a 1 star. The ending of this sucks. It's so unsatisfying. And I mean, this book is a slow-paced book, and I do think that there are a lot of people who are going to have pacing issues with this. I know for a fact that I actually really enjoy slow-paced novels. For most of this novel, I did not have a pacing problem with it. However, the last 50 pages of this novel were so fucking slow. They were so boring and so slow, and everything was so drawn out. I also want to say too about Humphrey is that like as the novel progresses, he like kind of loses his grasp on reality. Basically, the more time Humphrey spends with Dolores, he just becomes more and more paranoid, and then that leads him to becoming like less and less tethered to reality. I genuinely think that this book is harmful. He very much spends the whole novel trying to sympathize and justify himself, and there are legitimately people who read this and think that Humper is like a sympathetic character and that he is like morally ambiguous or morally gray and that he has an internal struggle with himself, but he really doesn't. He also is like a classic abuser in here. Not even just that like he is sexually abusing this 12-year-old girl. More than that, like he emotionally abuses her repeatedly in like a classic, like every like whatever checklist you have for abuse all the way down the line, just like absolute classic emotional abuse throughout the entire novel. The second book in this vlog is called The Real Lolita. It is a nonfiction investigative novel about a real case of a, I think like 11-year-old girl, and the author of The Real Lolita basically is saying that the author of Lolita was inspired by this real life case, and that's how he wrote Lolita. And it's really funny because at the end of this book, Humpert mentions the girl that is the girl from The Real Lolita. Like he mentions that real case in this book. So you as the reader know 100% that he is very aware that that is a real case. Also in here, Dolores Hayes is the Lolita character, and in the foreword, the made-up guy who writes the made-up foreword of this book is like, names of the characters in this novel were changed, and then he says that Dolores Hayes, her last name is different but similar to who she really is to protect her identity. And the real Lolita's last name is Horner and Dolores's last name is Hayes. Nabokov, as a made-up person, are writing a foreword for your book, which is a made-up memoir, and you, Nabokov, are saying this character, Dolores Hayes' last name is similar to the real Lolita, and then the real Lolita's last name is Horner. Interesting! There is an afterword in this book where Nabokov actually does talk about writing this novel and his thoughts and things. The weird thing is he writes in his afterword, he's like, when readers read my book, they're going to try to be like, why did you write this? What was the thought process behind it? Like, why would you write something so vile? And they're going to try to make me into like a vile person because I wrote a book that has vile things in it. Well, yeah. And then he's like, but when I write my stories, I don't have an intention. He says that he doesn't want to send a message when he writes a story, that like he just thinks of a story and then needs to get the story out of his head, which I suppose is like fair. I think every novel should have a purpose, and sometimes the purpose is just to be entertaining, and I understand that like it's okay to have problematic things in books that are just there for entertaining. There's like a whole genre of erotica that is full of problematic tropes that people like because they like to read about this trope, but like if it happened in real life, they'd be like, oh no, this is like not okay. So like I get that and I understand that, and sometimes the purpose of a book is just entertainment. But books also don't exist in a vacuum. It's really easy to be like, oh, well, I didn't have a message to send in this book. But it's like, if you don't have a message to send in your book, maybe you should make sure that the message you end up sending isn't, hey, pedophilia is okay as long as you really truly love the 12-year-old you're raping. And I know that there's going to be some haters that are like, no, you just missed the point. That's fine. Maybe I did miss the point. Maybe when I read Becoming Lolita, I will learn something about this book that will change my opinion and I will get it. But all I got out of this book was disgusting pro-pedophilia bullshit. I wanted to talk more about the ending and why it's so unsatisfying. I don't have words to properly articulate it, but it just feels wrong that Nabokov wrote this whole book where he exploits this girl, and at the end, then he kills her. I can't be the only one though that like it feels wrong that this man wrote this whole story, and like, right, like it feels wrong that this man wrote this story about this girl and mistreated her in every way possible, and then made it so that like the ending of the story wasn't even about her. Like the ending of the story, the final plot points aren't even about the main character, because Dolores is the main character. Like, I know it's told from Humpert's point of view, but Dolores is the main driving factor of this entire novel. She is so miserable. She is so depressed. You get to see minor glimpses about how much she hates her life, and then it's just bad. It's a terrible ending. I think that's all I want to say about Lolita, but we're now moving on to the real Lolita. That will be book number 2 for this vlog, and I guess I will talk to you when I have an update. Hi, it's been 7 months since I updated the Lolita vlog, but I'm back at it again. I just filmed my best books of 2022, and so yeah, why not start the new year off with the real Lolita. This is a look into the real life case of Sally Horner. Sally was an 11-year-old girl who got kidnapped in 1948 and was held hostage by a pedophile. Apparently this case had a major influence on Lolita, so yeah, we're gonna read about it and find out, you know, how much did Nabokov actually pull from this case and how much was from his actual brain. Good morning. I finished the real Lolita, and honestly, it's not good. It's fine, but honestly, I think I'm gonna give it a 2-star. I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with it. I just don't think that it should be a book. I think this entire thing should have been like an essay that was like printed online somewhere in like a blog, in a magazine, something like that. I do think that Lolita exists because Nabokov saw Sally Horner's case and kind of took inspiration from it. I will say that Nabokov is an excellent writer in terms of like pure craft. Like, yes, I hated Lolita and thought it was absolute trash, but when you look at it from an objective, like, writing craft point of view, in prose and word selection and the alliteration choices he makes, the imagery that he provides in his books, like, he is a good writer. He is the one that put down the words in the book and sat down and wrote the book. However, I will say that he definitely got a lot of the major plot points from just like real life. It's fine that that happened because I mean, you know, I think a lot of writers write from real life. There's a lot of people that are inspired by things that happen in real life, and that's normal. I just think it's so funny that Nabokov was like, don't ask me what inspired this. Nothing inspired this. Like, he maintained constantly and continuously that, like, every thought he had in his entire book was so original. It just sprouted magically from his head. Like, this man had such a fragile ego when it came to, like, the creative thinking process. Why are you so pressed if people are trying to find what your inspirations are? Like, many authors and many artists of all forms of media are very open about what their inspirations are. It's not a bad thing to be inspired by real life. So it's like, it's just so funny to me that there's so many instances of Nabokov being inspired by other authors and real life events, and yet he's so adamant that no, he's just a creative genius. There's no one doing it like him. When I started reading this, I was very curious to see how much of Sally Horner's life is going to be in Lolita. And I think that like there are definitely numerous touching points between Sally Horner's case and Dolores and HH in Lolita, but not an overly absurd amount. I think what's actually more funny too is that Humpert's character has this like whole story that he tells the reader before he even meets Lolita. Basically, like, the character's, like, sexual awakening. It's very uncomfortable for the reader to read about. It, like, majorly gave me the ick. What's funny to me is that part, he seemed to, like, just completely rip from like a psychology textbook. In the book, Sarah Wyman points out, she's like, yeah, there's this psychology textbook where a psychologist interviewed an actual pedophile about like why they think that they are a pedophile. And they talked about like their first sexual encounter. And it's literally like point by point exactly what happened to Humpert. And I was like, okay, Nabokov, you shouldn't be worried about people connecting you to Sally Horner. You should be worried about people connecting you to this, because you straight ripped this story in Lolita straight from that psychology textbook. I don't think he like completely copied Sally Horner's case, but I do think that there is quite a bit of evidence to prove that it influenced and very much inspired the creation of Lolita. I don't think that Lolita would be the same if Nabokov hadn't had information about Sally Horner and what happened to her. The reason I'm giving the book 2 stars is because it literally shouldn't be a book. First of all, Sarah Wyman points out that, like, she's not the person that connected Sally Horner to Dolores and the Lolita novel. It was done by two people before her. And I'm not saying that Sarah Weinman didn't put in work, because Sarah Weinman had access to additional information than those two original people did, because I guess like Nabokov's notes or something were like put in a library somewhere, but then like recently in like the last 10 or 20 years or something, they became like public access. So she did have access to more information than those other two people. So it's not that Sarah didn't provide any new information, but the discussion of Sally Horner in comparison to Lolita does not warrant a book. There's just not enough facts and there's not enough similarities to write an entire book about it. And so to make the entire book happen, Sarah Weinman takes you all over the place to just dumb shit you don't care about. I would say, being generous, it's a minimum of 50% filler bullshit that I was reading and I was like, I don't care. I don't care. I do not care. Get to the point of the book. Like, I don't care to hear about Nabokov's freaking butterfly trips. That has nothing to do with Sally Horner. Tell me about Sally Horner. Tell me about Lolita. That's what I want to know about. That's why I paid money for this book. I just simply do not care that Nabokov apparently made scientific breakthroughs about butterfly genitalia. The other thing that's making me rate this book 2 stars is that, you know, when you're in school and you're writing an essay and you just don't know what else to write and you're so close to hitting your word count, so instead you start like writing in a circle where you end up repeating yourself and you just keep like adding filler words. Not only was there filler content, there was just like this circular writing where she was just saying like 3 separate sentences, but all 3 of those sentences said the exact same thing. And so the entire book felt so redundant. But then not only that, the entire book was just so repetitive. So like she would literally write like 3 sentences in a row that all say the same thing. But then she would take the point that she made in this chapter and plop the exact same point down in like the next chapter, but it wouldn't be like, hey, we discovered this in this chapter and now we have extrapolated that point with this information. No. It wasn't expanding the point. It wasn't adding any new information. It was just literally her repeating herself throughout the entire book. And I will say, I think Sarah Weinman researched her ass off for this. I genuinely do. I think she put in hours and hours and hours of research into this book, and I do appreciate the effort that she went to, because I'm not going to do that. I'm happy that I have access to like one piece that will give me all of the knowledge. So thank you for that. And that's why it is getting 2 stars, because I do think that she researched her ass off. I just think that out of the 258 pages, probably 150 could have been scrapped. She also made the point to research anything that would kind of implicate Nabokov as a pedophile himself. There was never anything actually like linking him to pedophilia, like nothing. One of the biggest red flags in this entire book, not about Sarah, about Nabokov, is that he was literally like best friends with an actual known pedophile. Like, the job that Nabokov got as a professor in college was because he was literally friends with a pedophile, a known pedophile. And he's just like, yeah, that's cool. And he would just go over to his house and like play chess with him. And that proves to me that Nabokov was a piece of shit. The thing is, Nabokov has gone on record so many times and been like, I wrote this book and the character in the book glorifies pedophilia, but that doesn't mean that I glorify pedophilia. And I'm like, that's a valid argument. Like, you know, there are plenty of people that write disgusting, terrible characters in books, and we know that HH is an unreliable narrator. And so I understand that Nabokov can be like, yes, I wrote this terrible person. That doesn't mean that I approve of this. However, you can't be good friends with a pedophile and then say, like, I don't approve of pedophilia. Like, you can't do that. It does make me, like, a little infuriated that Nabokov is, like, on the record all the time being like, don't attribute anything else to my character, like, don't read into my character. And he's like, I didn't have any motivation to write this story, and talking, like, all of this talk. But it's like, sir, you're literally friends, good friends with a known pedophile, and you're trying to tell me that I shouldn't read into your, like, stance about pedophilia when, right? Like, that doesn't make sense. So honestly, thank you to Sarah Wyman for teaching me that Nabokov was indeed good friends with a pedophile. Anyways, I finished with this book. Way too long, but very, very well researched, very clear. It wasn't confusing at any point. It was just overwritten. 2 stars. I will now be moving on to Being Lolita by Allison Wood.
The coffee flavor this week is spiced almond toffee.
Good morning. I just filmed my 2023 reading goals for the second time because all of the audio was completely unusable, but I just wanted to give an update because I also finished Being Lolita by Allison Wood. I meant to do a halfway point check-in with this book, but you see, what happened was I finished the whole thing in a day. And it's excellent. This book single-handedly saved this entire vlog. Being Lolita is a memoir written by Allison Wood about her experience with her English teacher grooming and abusing her using the book Lolita. And now, as an adult, Allison Wood is a college professor and she actually teaches Lolita in her courses. I'm not rating this. I loved it. It's excellent. If you have the mental capacity for this book, I do really recommend it. However, it just feels too personal for me to give a rating to. I know I have rated memoirs before, and I honestly can't tell you what makes this one different, but it just, it feels wrong in my gut to give a rating for this book. It's so heart-wrenching. It is very, very difficult, sometimes disgusting to read, but I do recommend it. I think that it is so very important that this book exists, and I'm very happy that it exists. I'm very happy that I read it. And I also did want to say that Allison Wood has a fantastic writing style. Her voice is so clear and distinct. As you're reading, like, because of the nature of the book, like, you know that bad things are gonna happen, but it still is so heartbreaking and heart-wrenching to actually read what happens. You just want so desperately to prevent the bad thing from happening, and there's just nothing you can do. I also wanted to mention that I do wish Allison Wood would have spent more time talking about how she handles Lolita in her classroom now that she teaches it, and kind of like using the book for good rather than evil, which sounds so dramatic to say, but like, honestly is the freaking truth, right? I mean, she does talk about it. I just personally would have liked to see more, but I did want to say that, like, what Allison Wood says about how she teaches Lolita made me feel so vindicated, because when I was reading Lolita, I was like, the prose, outstanding, so good. but this is hot garbage. I was like, this is hot garbage wrapped up in beautiful prose. And so obviously Allison Wood, as like a professor at a college, has like a more nuanced look on the book than that. Like, I'm not saying that that's what she teaches in her class. It just made me feel vindicated to know that I didn't completely misread the entire book and completely miss the point. That no, like, I did get the point. The point is that like Nabokov is tricking the reader, that Humpert is an unreliable narrator, that the prose and the alliteration and all of the literary tools are designed to trick the reader. That being said, I still hated Lolita, and I still think it is so suspicious that Nabokov wrote about pedophilia for like 20 years. Just in case you're wondering, Lolita is not his first book or story or whatever involving pedophilia. He put it in like everything he wrote, and his best friend was a pedophile. We're all seeing the red flags here, right? That being said, read Being Lolita. And I will say that even though I hated reading Lolita, I'm now happy that I can shit talk it from a educated point of view rather than just like the common public opinion of the book. So, you know, we're out here winning today. I'm so sorry for how chaotic this vlog is. I really am trying to put it together in a cohesive manner, but I just know that I have failed. I know that this vlog is, like myself, a hot mess. If you watched the whole thing, thank you so very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for spending time with me. Stay safe. Stay hydrated, stay warm this winter. I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.